This time we will tell a manhwa entitled The Reincarnation of the Forbidden Archmage. This manhwa tells the story of an archmage who is very strong and invincible. However, due to an incident, the archmage died for some reason and was reincarnated into a youth who was weak and didn't have any skills. So how can that happen? Let's start the storyline. The story begins with a gate or dungeon that was opened 20 years ago on Earth. Along with that, various powers called skills also appeared. But only 1% of the entire human population has skilled. Not long after that incident, an organization was formed for the opponents of the dungeon, and they are now known as the Adventurers Guild. Then the scene moves to our main character who is registering as an adventurer. When checking, the officer is surprised because the main character doesn't have one but still forces him to register as an adventurer. Feeling unsure, the officer wanted to make sure he was sure he wanted to be an adventurer. The main character replied that he was sure and would work hard to do it. And beside him, there is also a woman who also has the same fate as the main character, where she also has no skills but still registers as an adventurer. Shortly thereafter, a man named Fukimoto taunted the two of them from behind. Fukimoto said that their decision was the same as suicide. And here, because Fukimoto is a C rank where he will guide them to do raid for the first time. Hearing that, the officer felt calm because if there was a rank C like him, the two beginners could be safe. Then after registering, Fukimoto took the main character and the woman to where the gate was going. On the way there, we are just told the main character's name is Siki, and the woman was Amami. At that time, Amami asked the reason why Siki became an adventurer even though he didn't have any skills. Siki replied that by becoming an adventurer, earning money is the easy one, considering that the drop items obtained after raid have high selling prices, and the reason why Siki needs money is for the treatment of his younger sister named Kadoha, where one day when Siki came home he found Kadoha lying down. Worried about this, Siki took him to the local hospital, and the doctor said there that Kadoha had awakened a skill that consumed himself, and the name of the disease is Incompatible Skill Syndrome. In this country, it's rare for people to be infected with cases like this, so the doctor suggested to Siki to bring Kadoha to America. Of course, the treatment is very expensive, and the doctor said the cost is around 500 million yen. And that's the reason why Siki became an adventurer even though he doesn't have any skills at all. The scene switches back to the three of them who have arrived at the gathering place for the adventurers to start the raid. While there, the two of them were not welcomed by the other two seniors, because someone like Siki and Amami were useless, and in this world, those without skills were called incompetent. So without lingering for long, they started to go inside to start the raid. The seniors didn't explain anything and just asked Siki and Amami to see because they would understand. Before entering, we are shown that it turns out that Siki has a skill called Forbidden Restriction. So why didn't Siki's skill appear? This skill is very hidden. Then it is explained that Forbidden Restriction is an ability that allows the user to use magic power in his previous life in exchange for skill point magic. And it turns out that Siki is a reincarnation, where before he was very strong and invincible, even to the point where he was called a solitary archmage. But in that life, even though he was powerful and invincible, he was unhappy and bored. But in his current life as Siki, he feels very happy even though he has many shortcomings. And now the only reason why he still wants to live is to save Kadoha. Next, the raid started. When they entered, they saw that Fukimoto and other seniors were dealing with several monsters. But with strength and cooperation they could defeat the monsters easily. Moreover, this dungeon is rank E, so the monsters inside this dungeon weren't very strong. After successfully defeating several monsters, they arrived at the gate to head to the dungeon boss. Without any hesitation, they went inside and fought the boss to clear this rank E dungeon. When entering the boss room, suddenly heard someone's voice saying several things have been accomplished, and surprisingly the extra boss appeared. Whereupon an enormous bull monster appeared. And when you see the aura of the boss, you can see that the level of the boss is similar to that of a rank B adventurer. Seeing this, everyone is scared and panicked, especially with the extra boss appearing. The exit door won't open before defeating the boss. While the seniors who didn't want to die in vain tried hard to fight back, it was a pity that their efforts always failed and one of the seniors almost died from being slashed by the monster's attack. But surprisingly, Siki manages to block the boss's attack with his sword. Siki said that he had a way to beat the boss, and for that, Siki asked the seniors to carry out his orders. Where Siki asked Fukimoto to buy time because here he would be prepared to do one thing to be able to attack the monster. Here Siki will use the power of Forbidden Restricted. This is because now he is not allowed to use this skill, but Siki will try to do it. But here Siki doesn't use his body to use magic. Instead, Siki will channel magic so that Amami will release the magic. Well, why didn't Siki use this magic with his body? Because of this skill, he couldn't use power in the previous world, or simply said his power had been sealed. So if the magic has flowed to Amami, Siki suspects that this skill can be used by him. And because they didn't have time, Siki asked Amami to do as she said. This is because Amami here also can't do anything, he can only obey him. Then after Amami agreed, Siki started smoothing magic from Amami and giving his magic. Then after the steps were completed, Siki asked Amami to cast a spell and direct the attack on the boss. And unexpectedly a large fire attack called Lotus Fireball aimed at the boss and made the boss seriously injured to death. Seeing this, Amami was very shocked because he didn't expect Siki to be a very strong person. After defeating the dungeon boss, Amami got a drop item called Minotaur Axe. In addition, they also get a mysterious red crystal. Not yet explained whether the usefulness of the crystal is expensive. Meanwhile, Siki's side leveled up and got the title of Reincarnated Archmage. After successfully defeating the Minotaur, they left the dungeon and requested emergency assistance to save the injured senior. Meanwhile, we are explained that the red crystal inside the dungeon is the core of the dungeon, where if the dungeon core is destroyed, then the dungeon will disappear. However, there are some cases where the core is not destroyed and is used as training for beginners. Then after the problem was solved, they returned to the Adventurers Guild and were given a log card, where a guild card is used to record any monster that has been defeated by someone. And the purpose of the card is for fair reward distribution. Not long after that, they were visited by the General Operational Division of the Adventure Guild named Hamada, where Hamada returns the guild card that he previously asked for. But before rewarding the two of them, Hamada wanted to ask a few questions about the extra boss that appeared. Before coming here, Siki asked Amami to be quiet and not tell about his skill, because if everyone knows, then he will be in trouble. On hearing those words, Amami would follow his orders. But here Amami also asked him one thing: would Siki want to be his teacher? But at that time Siki refused, not that he didn't want to, but if he taught the skill earlier, Siki was afraid that Amami would get caught in something dangerous that could kill him. We return to the question from Hamada, who asked Amami to explain the appearance of the extra boss and how they beat it. Amami explained that it was Senior who had seriously injured the dungeon boss and was the one who dealt the final blow. Hearing this, Hamada hesitated a bit, but because Amami only explained that, Hamada finally believed him. Now, because Hamada couldn't dig deeper here, he gave up and will wait for the seniors to recover so they can be questioned. Then the point of the meeting was finally discussed, where since they were both listed as the last hit, Hamada was going to give them some money. And surprisingly, Siki got 250k yen, while Amami's lost hit got 3 million yen. Suddenly, Amami was very surprised by the gift. After the meeting, Amami, who felt he had done nothing, intended to give this money to Siki. But at that time Siki refused because it was a gift that she got. Besides, if he accepts this money, then Hamada will suspect him. And since then, Siki and Amami have exchanged contacts and information and gone their separate ways. Meanwhile, when he comes home, Siki looks happy because even though he hasn't fought in a long time, he is still strong. And because earlier he had already risen to level 10. He checked it because usually by leveling up he would get potions and skills. And surprisingly, the system explains you can summon management fairies. Feeling curious about this, Siki pressed him. And suddenly a girl appeared and looked angry. The girl said to Siki that she had missed training for a full 20 years. Meanwhile, here Siki, who doesn't know anything, asks the girl to explain. The girl said that she was his creation in charge of managing the forbidden restriction, and his appearance is only for one purpose: to make Siki stronger. But here Siki doesn't know him. Then the girl says, maybe you've lost your memory. If what he said was the truth, he asked the girl how he could die. But apparently, the girl doesn't know because she was created after the death of Siki. Hearing this confused Siki even more. If indeed the girl was created after his death, then it means in his previous life he had planned this. Meanwhile, the girl also didn't explain anything, as if the girl was covering up what happened. And maybe the girl didn't tell him because, in his previous life, Siki asked him not to tell her. Then Siki asked the girl, what do you mean to make me strong? The girl replied by updating the forbidden barrier, then Siki could become strong quickly. Then to explain this, the girl showed a system called item to trade, where, with the help of this system, Siki can take the items you have first. Of course, not all of the items he owned used to exist, all were limited and depended on the amount of stock collected by Siki first. Finding this, Siki was happy because the previous item was there, which means his item box is also there. Item box itself is an infinite time space, where the storage contains legendary weapons that have been collected by Siki. And of course, there are conditions to be able to take the sword, where Siki has to bring several points to take the sword. Feeling interested in this, Siki looked at the item box. Sure enough, when he opened the item box, all his swords were there. But what he's looking for now isn't that, because he used to have omnipotent elixir items. And when you see the price to be able to get this item costs 500 million yen. Where the function of this item can heal all wounds and even the last stage of the disease. Knowing this makes Siki excited because if he gets this thing, he doesn't have to go far to America for Kotoha treatment. And here the girl also told, which was during the previous dungeon boss fight, he can get stronger because previously she has given him a buff. So the more Siki faces monsters, the stronger he can become. Knowing this, Siki was very happy because with this he could grow strong quickly and bought the item to heal Kotoha. And for that, Siki received the forbidden barrier and will maximize it. Well, because here the girl doesn't have a name yet, Siki named her Sphere. Even though it sounded complicated, she accepted it. After getting a buff from Sphere, Siki intends to take part in the raid, which the next day Siki joins a party in raiding a rank D dungeon through the Adventurers Guild. Now because here Siki is rank F, all the members look down on him. Meanwhile, on Siki's side, there is no need to worry because the average member is rank C, so later if something unexpected happens he doesn't need to show his strength. And after making their strategy start doing raid. However, when he entered Siki, he found members who had strange auras. It had not yet been explained what would happen next. For sure there would be traitors among their members. The story continues from the D rank dungeon. It is clear that all raid members are fighting desperately against the orcs. Suzuki, Takai, and others try hard to defeat the goblins simultaneously. They ask Siki to back off, of course, finding that Siki felt bored. And when the orc wants to breathe fire, Takai and others must resist the attack even though the movement is very messy. Then surprisingly Siki was already in front of the orc with glowing red eyes. Siki let go of his sword and stopped the orc's breath of fire. At that time we saw a flashback last night. He wanted to think about how to use the skill points to the fullest. However, the points are only 9 points, meaning that each level up gets 1 point. Then the first skill set I got was Fireball and Enhance. He pondered whether the best choice would be Fireball or Enhance, but he just found one important thing: the skill obtained from Forbidden Restriction does not require an MP. This means that Siki can use Enhance anywhere. Because of all these advantages he finally chose Enhance. And when looking at the explanation of the skill, it seems that the part on the right is leaning toward close combat. And since the skill points I have are limited, I will focus the fighting style on close combat. Back in the fight, where Siki used skill Enhance and released lightning energy in one of his hands, he then hit the orc's stomach with Enhanced skill. We can then see that the sonic impact skill released by Siki is so strong that the orc is blown away and immediately dies. Takai and others are very surprised to see the strength of Siki because Siki is actually just a reserve. In Siki's own perspective, he was quite surprised because he could go up 2 levels by defeating only one orc. Suzuka, who was curious, immediately asked how you got that strong. Siki guiltily said that he just acquired this skill yesterday. Suzuka told him that he should first explain his powers so he wouldn't worry. At the end of words, Suzuka said thank you for saving them. After that, Takai asked the chairman to share all the loot equally because Siki has an important role in this dungeon. And if Siki is on this team until the end of the dungeon, then we can finish the dungeon easily. Then happily Suzuki said that from now on we will rely on you, Siki. Soon they quickly arrived at the boss dungeon. With Siki's help and hard work, they were finally able to defeat the dungeon boss without being seriously injured, and the good news here is that Siki has leveled up to 17. For this victory, Takai is grateful and didn't expect Siki's abilities to exceed our expectations. With fiery joy, Suzuki told everyone that we will celebrate this victory in the future guild. However, surprisingly, Ozawa stabbed Suzuki from behind. Then with a face without remorse, Ozawa said that I have committed murder. The story continues from a truly tragic scene where surprisingly Ozawa stabbed his own friend. Of course, Takai was very angry with his actions because he did not suspect that Ozawa would dare to commit betrayal. Takai immediately releases an attack to kill Ozawa, but the attack is easily parried by him. Takai asks Siki and Suzuka not to get involved with internal guild matters. Ozawa responded very casually that I will kill this person with my own hands. Siki, who got that order from Takai, could only obey him and didn't move at all. Siki actually gave advice to Takai not to push himself too hard, because the world is like this. But Takai said to hand over Ozawa to me. There Siki observes the movement and sword of Ozawa, who seems to have experience in the killing. And that can be seen from the red knife he uses. Back in the fight, Takai immediately moves quickly, swinging his sword toward Ozawa. Takai realizes that he should be able to do it at this speed, but what is happening in his movements can be read by Ozawa easily. And it turns out that all this time he's been hiding his skills. Ozawa's possible rank now is B. Meanwhile, Ozawa, who got a gap, is suddenly behind Takai. He mentions that longsword users have a weakness when fighting opponents with high speed. And sure enough, we can see Ozawa can stab with a circular motion. Ozawa mentioned whether Takai could kill him with such strength. At that time Takai was silent and looked at the potion in his hand. It is known that this potion is a birthday gift given by Suzuki when he first completed the mission. Actually, Takai will only use it at the right time, but because the wound is this deep, inevitably he has to use it. While drinking the potion, Ozawa didn't allow Takai to recover. He made a quick move and intended to slash his neck directly. But when the knife hit Takai's body, there was an explosion of light that sent Ozawa flying. It turns out that the potion effect adds 2 to the user's attack, and all attacks can be blocked. Then Takai gathered energy into his sword to finish Ozawa with one strike. But Ozawa again showed an insane skill, which before the attack hit him he was able to pass through and even scratch the eye of the scar with one move. Before Ozawa ended Takai's life from behind, Suzuka immediately shot an arrow to stop him. Of course, Ozawa, who was very angry, immediately strangled her and said not to interfere in this matter. With his scary face, Ozawa picked up the knife and pointed it at Suzuka's neck. Luckily, Siki immediately blocked the knife with his sword. Ozawa was very surprised because there were people who could fend off the knife. Siki told Takai to hand over Ozawa to him. Ozawa felt humiliated because the substitute seemed unlikely to be able to beat me. But without words, Siki issued a sonic impact skill which made Ozawa bounce far enough from that place. Seeing Ozawa still standing, Siki intends to bring out all of his abilities. At the corner, Ozawa throws out a strange red ball and moves forward to outwit Siki's movement. Siki easily endured it, even though he said that Ozawa's strength is still too weak. Of course, a very annoyed Ozawa said that you're going to make you be my bonus material. Again, Ozawa uses his maximum speed to find a gap to kill Siki. Siki loudly insulted him that such speed is too slow, and yep, Siki can stop it with just one attack. When his attacks were stopped like that, Ozawa realized that Siki wasn't a beginner, but rather that Siki's strength was stronger than his. Ozawa says who he really is, same as before. Siki replies that I'm a substitute. Since there was no chance to kill Siki, Ozawa immediately targeted Suzuka as his weakness. Of course, Siki didn't let it go. His eyes turned white and energy came out of his body. He was already behind Ozawa and stabbed him without Ozawa noticing. Ozawa was furious as he struggled, but for some reason, he suddenly couldn't use his skill. It turns out that the one who did it all is Siki. Previously, he had attacked the vulnerable point in his mana channel, so that was why Ozawa couldn't use any skills at all. When hearing this explanation, Ozawa had arrived to be able to do anything else. He let go of the knife and gave information about the knife. Ozawa reveals, kill me with this dagger, its strength will increase every time you kill someone. The EXP points you get from killing people are more than monsters. Previously, the adventurers were hiding the fact that there would be no mass killings. With a terrible face, Ozawa asked Siki to hold the dagger and for starters kill me. Then you will know how good it is to kill people. Siki only responded with pity for him. It seems you can't escape the curse to be stronger. In his mind, Siki expressed that if it wasn't because of that forbidden restriction, maybe I could walk on the road. I think he actually saw a lot of people in my past life who couldn't choose their reason to get stronger. Of course, hearing that, Ozawa felt disgusted and asked to kill him immediately. Siki only if he didn't want to kill him. The reason is that Ozawa looks a lot like him, and if I kill you then I'll fall into the same apricot. Because Siki didn't want to kill him, Ozawa immediately took something out of his mouth, which turned out to be a smoke bomb. He immediately took his knife and intended to stab himself. Unknowingly, Siki was already behind him and hit him on the back of the neck until he fainted. Siki gives advice, before you die you'd better repent. After that, Suzuka asked why Siki said that. Previously, according to her, Siki was not that kind of person. In fact, he seemed to be a very good person, even though his aura was a little creepy before. Feeling guilty, Siki immediately stroked her head while say thanks you. Intermittently leaving dungeon, Ozawa was immediately arrested and Takai was taken to the hospital to get treatment. When Takai woke up, he thanked Siki for saving the chairman. If he is not treated immediately, then Suzuki will definitely die. After leaving the Takai room, Suzuka asked Siki to speak for a moment. Suzuka wanted to know that at such a young age, Siki could obtain such power. And here it is known that Suzuka is older than Siki, where Siki is still in junior high school, while Suzuka is already in senior high school. Then hear this, Siki was very happy and said that he had a little sister. Suzuka felt a little surprised because she didn't expect such a cold attitude to actually have a little sister. She reveals wants to meet Kadoha, Siki's little sister. Before going home, Suzuka asked for his cell phone number so she can contact him easily. After returning from that place, Kadoha informed him and gave the current condition. It was seen that even though Kadoha was in pain, she was still cheerful. Not long after that, strange smoke appeared from his cell phone, which turned out to be Iori. This Iori is a system that only Siki can see, and she is a person who really cares about what Siki is doing. Iori gave the good news to Siki, which is that I've added the hidden dungeon key to the exchange item. This lock is a very difficult solo dungeon. Hearing that, Siki felt weird. What feature is that? Sounds interesting. When you press this feature, a lot of ranks will appear in front of you. Then he was surprised why there is a 50% discount. Iori reveals that it is energy to buy items. Iori then asked him to use the key and level up. When he saw all the rank prices listed, Siki was impressed, because rank C alone requires millions of yen. Iori gave a little warning. If this dungeon is different from the usual dungeons, then this means that the monsters are much stronger than the usual ones. And with that, you will get more EXP for forbidden restrictions. Even though this is very difficult to do alone, with Siki's current strength, Iori guarantees that he can do it. Hearing this explanation, Siki then decided to save his money by buying a B rank dungeon. But before that, he tried first to challenge a C rank hidden dungeon. Without thinking, Siki immediately entered the dungeon, even though he had finished Raid Dungeon D yesterday. With very high ambition, my wish is to become even stronger in order to be able to get the antidote for Kadoha. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Kadoha's face was very pale, and he coughed up blood several times. And the bad news is no one is in the room, so like it or not, she has to wash it herself. However, when walking a few steps, Kadoha immediately fell unconscious. The nurse who saw this immediately reported it to the doctor because Kadoha's condition was getting worse. Meanwhile, Siki didn't know the news from Kadoha because now he was in a C-rank dungeon. When he saw the area around here, he felt a little strange because he had never encountered a forest like this. It also happened that he saw the Lana'a fruit from his previous life in front of him. Siki didn't expect that the fruit could grow in a place like this. This fruit is used for alchemy, but this fruit is rare. And if this fruit is found, then around here there will be lots of monsters. Then to find out the location of the monster, he jumped very high in the air. Right from above, the target is clearly visible, a living creature like a rabbit, but its speed is extraordinary. The story continues with Siki, who has found his target. He immediately rushes after the rabbit. However, it seems that the speed of the rabbit cannot be matched by this situation. So he had to think of something. When he thought about it, suddenly Iori appeared and gave suggestions to use Itsenia. But before that, Siki asked why she could appear in this dungeon. She explained that she could only appear in hidden dungeons. Regarding the topic of the problem, if I'm not mistaken, Itsenia is a carnivorous plant. The creature will try to eat whatever is nearby. Iori asks Siki to lure the rabbit into its habitat, and they will catch it for you, because that's the only solution that I have to do it. When chasing him and directing him to Itsenia place, for some reason, from behind there are lots of monsters chasing him. Even though we managed to catch it, later we had to fight with all of these monsters. Luckily, when approaching the habitat of Itsenia, the speed of the rabbit decreased. And to be able to increase the speed, the rabbit must eat the Lana'a fruit. Siki takes advantage of the opportunity to catch him. Unexpectedly, even Siki was trapped and eaten by Itsenia along with the rabbit. Same as usual, Siki can easily get out of the plant even if his level goes up. Surprisingly, his level is now 32. This is a very drastic increase. The problem this time is how to deal with all the monsters up here. From above, all the monsters started attacking Siki, but Siki only smiled and said that I had turned things around. And sure enough, he needed fire energy in his fists, and instantly kill all of these monsters with the Crimson Lotus Fireball skill. The huge explosion instantly destroyed the place until nothing remained. Siki was quite surprised that he was able to level up by 20, so the current level is 52. When looking at inventory, Siki was also quite surprised because he got some pretty good drop items. Iori said if you sell them you will easily make several million yen. Hearing this statement made Siki shocked, because if he continues to attack this dungeon then I can get 1 billion yen in a short time. Iori said again that Siki can only enter a rank C hidden dungeon once, so if you want to get more from this dungeon, Siki must enter a rank B dungeon. Their conversation suddenly stopped from Siki, who felt a very strong energy in front of him, and sure enough, in front of him was a rank C dungeon boss. The monster's appearance was very weird, namely a half-dragon man. Iori immediately analyzed the strength of the monster. Surprisingly, to fight this monster, it was recommended that Siki reach level 150. Despite knowing the difference in power, Siki did not want to back down, because if he beat him, he would get a lot of money. Siki said that this dungeon boss is just an EXP resource. Iori slightly explained that dragon skin is special because it can absorb magic. Usually, they are known as the immortal enemy of the witches. Knowing that Siki tried to attack him using physical attacks, but his attacks failed to scratch the monster. Then the monster spits out a strange liquid from its mouth. The liquid that hit the ground immediately melted. This means that if Siki is exposed to the liquid, he will die. It is also very likely that other attacks will definitely cause fatal injuries. Siki smiled, saying it's been a while since I wasn't this nervous against enemies. Then he took out an item from the Forbidden Restriction ability. He can store and retrieve items whenever he wants in separate dimensions. Once again, Siki will attack the monster with the axe he just got. Siki darted to the back of the monster's neck and intended to decapitate it, but what happened was that the axe couldn't scratch the monster's neck. At that time, Monster reversed the situation by throwing Siki with its tail. Surprisingly, Siki's axe that tried to withstand the attack was broken into two. Having no more weapons, Siki desperately attacks him with magic, as it was expected that his magic was absorbed by the dragon, which meant that the attack meant absolutely nothing to fight dungeon bosses. Of course, Siki doesn't just keep quiet, he has got an idea to solve the problem. There should be a limit to the monster's absorbing magic. If Siki can pass it, then it will leak. The good news here is that since Forbidden Restriction allows him to use skills without consuming MP, then he can cast the Fireball skill without fear of losing MP. With a face filled with confidence, Siki immediately cast the skill Crimson Lotus Fireball repeatedly. That's where the surprising thing happened, because too often using this skill, Siki repeatedly vomited a lot of blood. This means that even if you don't use MP, your physical strength cannot withstand the skill's weight. Despite knowing that this would happen, Siki still continued to use it, because according to him this pain is not comparable to the pain of losing Kadoha. Then we saw a large explosion of fire at the hole in that place, until in the end, the monster could not withstand the magic it received, so the human body of the monster was destroyed. Getting the opportunity, Siki, who was exhausted, continued to use the skill until the monster exploded. As expected, even though Siki was exhausted and his stamina was low, he managed to defeat the dungeon boss. For that victory, he got a B rank poison dragon sword. Yes, this is a very passable reward for defeating this monster. After that, Siki lay limp and couldn't move. Because Siki fainted, like it or not, Iori immediately took Siki out of this hidden dungeon. However, Iori put him in the wrong coordination, which means that this room does not belong to Siki but in someone else's place. And it turns out that this is Amami's room. Amami, who entered the room, was very surprised because Siki was in his room in a weak condition. Long story short, Amami immediately takes care of Siki to make her better. Siki thanks for helping him. Amami asked why Siki could be in this place. Siki explained what happened before. When hearing this, Amami was very surprised because going alone to a rank C dungeon was crazy. Before leaving, Amami gave him some food because, from the looks of it, Siki was quite hungry. Of course, Siki can't refuse it because it's not good to receive kindness from someone. When eating the soup, Siki was very happy because the cooking was very delicious. Then Siki asked, "Do you live apart from your parents?" Amami explained that his parents died after being attacked by monsters 7 years ago. Siki asks if that problem made you a hunter. Amami replied that it was not completely wrong, but she hoped to save many people from being like me. So that's why. Previously, she asked Siki to make her a student. Even though previously Siki said I wasn't fit to be a hunter, she wished to want to leave with everything she had. Hearing that, Siki immediately apologized and withdrew from the previous words, because Amami now has great confidence. "So now would you be my disciple?" Hearing this, Amami felt confused and very happy. Why only now Siki said it? Siki answered, "To be an adventurer it only takes courage." Hearing that, Amami of course accepted it and said, "I will look forward to the first lesson." After returning from Amami's place, Siki returned home to check his inventory. After taking a thorough look, he will sell some items and will use the rest. Then when he saw the stats and level now, Siki was quite surprised because his level was now 70. Iori stated that with this, Siki is now on par with C ranker. During this fun, Siki got a call from a doctor who said that Kadoha's condition was critical. If this continued, then it could be that Kadoha would die. The doctor suggested that Siki stays near Kadoha for a while. Siki asks the doctor to give his phone to Kadoha. Siki asks Kadoha to hold on a little longer because I've found a way to heal you. Despite such pain, Kadoha replied that I would wait for you. At that time, Siki's face became very serious. He asked Iori if I could get 500 million yes. Even so, Siki has to do it, otherwise Kadoha will die. Once again, Ioro gave a warning not to be careless because, with his current rank, it is impossible for him to survive the dungeon. Even though he has warned him several times, Siki remains firm with his decision, so Iori can only support it. Before long, Lama Siki immediately bought a rank dungeon and entered the dungeon without hesitation. Before heading to the floor, Iori will guide Siki so he doesn't make a big mistake. But when I wanted to enter the floor, Siki was surprised by the presence of a lion guarding Tower Nema. The bad news is that the level of the guard is at a level far from Siki, namely 350. Siki isn't afraid at all, because fighting monsters is strong, even if he thinks it's an advantage. If he can defeat him, then he will get a rare item, and fighting the next monster will not be too difficult. To fight an enemy as strong as this, Siki has exchanged several points for a new skill called Tenma. This skill is very useful for close combat. Tenma is a spell that causes a significant surge in terms of physical abilities when enveloped by highly concentrated mana. Exactly once Siki will use this moment to destroy the monster. The lion started to move forward and tried to bite him. Siki, who was ready, immediately used this skill. And sure enough, he was able to move quickly and kick the lion to blow it far enough from that place. The good news here is that he can use Tenma freely because he doesn't use MP. After dropping the lion, a notification appears saying that there is a special quest. Iori was very surprised because the special quests were a good opportunity to grow. The quest gave him the mission to tame the Lion of Nema. The reward is summoning magic. Knowing that, Siki felt a little strange about it, but if it was in his mind, then this is a very rewarding quest. At the time of thinking that, from front, Nema already moved to attack again. But with a flash, Siki can take him down with Tenma. Even though it's been taken down like that, Name can still stand up, and for some reason, Tenma Siki's attack doesn't have too much effect. However, Siki keeps trying. According to him, by making Nema his pet, it will be easy for him to get to the boss floor. After several battles, Siki finally realized that Nema had the same move. Of course, this is a big chance for Siki to beat him. He repeatedly dodged Nema's moves and succeeded in repeatedly knocking Nema down. In the end, with a very crushing blow, finally, Name was made helpless. Then for the last time, Siki asked Name to listen to him. Because he was battered and unable to do anything, Name finally complied with Siki's orders, which means he has completed the special quest. Siki gained Nema's summoning magic reward. Siki had also leveled up and obtained the White Lion gauntlets. Surprisingly, his level rose quite drastically and now it has become 120. Before continuing his journey, Siki asked Iori to provide an explanation of what enemies he would face. Iori said that the enemy was a B-rank undead monster pack of the first layer. After hearing this explanation, Siki chose a skill that could be useful in the next battle. And of course, Siki will utilize all the monsters in the first layer to get a lot of EXP. The story continues with Siki who intends to clear the dungeon. Before entering the sphere warned Siki that if he intends to enter then he must complete it because the dungeon will not be opened until the boss is defeated. Even though Siki has been warned, he will continue. So why is Siki in such a hurry here? Kadoha's condition is getting worse day by day. When entering, Siki saw seals on every edge of the building, and that was a sign that this dungeon was closed. Like it or not, Siki had to finish it. In addition, the sphere explained that the undead had come and asked Siki to get ready. Now because of the high-level undead, Siki didn't fight him alone, where he summoned Demia as their opponent, whereupon Siki ordered the Nema to run around to attract the attention of the undead. And the reason Siki asked Nema to do that was he made Nema into bait so Siki could annihilate them in one strike. And then after the undead were provoked, Siki began to coat his sword with Tenma and then became a demon sword, where with just one slash Siki managed to kill all the gathered undead. And thanks to that, Siki leveled up. After checking his status, Siki was surprised because he didn't expect his level to rise rapidly to around 240. Apart from that, he also got drop items that had high price values. Then Siki asked Sphere how much money if all the items owned were sold. Sphere answered that the total of all those sales was around 600 million yen. Finding that, Siki was quite a shock because he didn't expect to be able to raise money this fast. And because his dream has been achieved, Siki intends to go home. Hearing this, of course, Sphere told Siki that he couldn't go home before heading to the top floor and defeating the boss. Finding this, Siki does not run out of ideas, and he seeks solutions to quickly go to the top. Then when thinking that the shape of this tower rises, Siki intends to forcefully destroy the roof so he can meet the dungeon boss quickly. Meanwhile on the Sphere side, who found a crazy idea from Siki, just kept silent and said, "Are you crazy?" Siki only replied that this was the only thing he could do so he could go home soon. It wasn't long before Siki started preparing to destroy the roof. Before launching the action, Sphere warns that the boss tower in this dungeon is the Grim Reaper, which has level 550. Even though here Siki knows that his level is far apart, but here Siki is sure that he can beat him because, with the power of the forbidden restriction, anything can happen. Then after getting ready, Siki took out skill Tenma and prepared to destroy the roof to the top floor. Sure enough, Siki's crazy action was successful and they both reached the top floor. When he was there, it was seen that the Grim Reaper was seen sitting in his king's chair. It didn't take long for the Grim Reaper, who was starting to be threatened, immediately mobilized the undead to fight Siki. Meanwhile, Siki's side used the perception block skill to block the attacks of the undead. Where is this skill useful for hiding its whereabouts so the undead doesn't attack it? Feeling his undead attack fail, the Grim Reaper came down and immediately behind him and ready to make a slash. But because here Siki already knows this tactic, Siki immediately uses the skill Eye of Wisdom to find out his whereabouts. Even though the Eye of Wisdom in Papua is not complete yet, this upper level ability is still useful to fight it. Thanks to that, Siki managed to avoid and counterattack, and as he suspected, his sword managed to stab the Grim Reaper. But even though the attack was successful, the level difference made the attack only do a little damage. But even so, Siki is sure that if he attacks continuously then Siki can beat him. But here Siki missed one thing, where he just remembered that now he has a weak mental resistance. And at the same time, Siki saw the shadow of a Kadoha who was in pain. Seeing this, Siki fell silent, while the Grim Reaper was seen behind him and carried out a slash. And sure enough, because at that time, Siki, who had been mentally affected, couldn't avoid it and was hit by a slash from the Grim Reaper. In this difficult condition, Siki was confused about what to do, and the only thing that occurred to him was Kadoha's happiness. Memories of happiness with Kadoha made him rise from his situation, because if he were to die here then his past and present life would be just as boring. And suddenly a system appears and tells Siki whether you want to remove the forbidden restriction. While the Sphere, who knew this, was also surprised because as long as he was created he didn't know about this. On the side of Siki, who sees this, asks if she accepts, then my restriction will be released. Here Siki, who doesn't understand all of this, finally accepts it and will accept the consequences later. After accepting that, the system then lifted the forbidden restriction and started setting up Forbidden Archmage for free. And at the same time, the Grim Reaper, who felt an air of danger, immediately slashed Siki from behind. But it was too late because Siki has now got his strength back in full. Where because Siki didn't want to waste time, he immediately shot and landed an attack on the Grim Reaper, which is a powerful power wielded by Siki, which power is very crazy, and only with a light attack Siki managed to defeat the Grim Reaper and the dungeon until nothing remained. Then after being released, Siki went straight home and headed to the hospital with his abilities. And at the same time at the hospital, it was seen that Katoha's condition was getting worse and he was starting to lose consciousness. But at the right time before Katoha lost his life, Siki came and immediately drank the elixir he had just bought with all the money he had. And the effects of these items are very crazy, where Katoha looks fit and in normal condition. Seeing this, Siki was moved to feel both sad and happy because Katoha had returned. After that, Siki came to the doctor and asked for an explanation of him whether Katoha's condition had returned to normal. The doctor said that Katoha had returned to normal and was allowed to go home tomorrow. The doctor also asked Siki elixir what could heal like that. Siki replied that Siki found an item that can cure all diseases. Hearing that, the doctor smiled and said, "I didn't expect elixir to be like that. And if so, it must be somewhere far away and mysterious." With a smile, Siki could only laugh. So, because the next day Katoha was allowed to go home, Siki intends to prepare a taxi. But at that time Katoha refused and said that she wanted to walk because it had been a long time since she had seen the situation outside. While walking home, the two of them bought some ingredients to make their favorite meal from Katoha. And when he got home, Siki forgot that Sphere was still there. But in reality, Katoha is not afraid but happy. And because they like to talk, finally they both can get along quickly. Then Siki will cook Katoha's favorite meal. Then when it was finished, they both ate the meal happily and reminisced about their past. And suddenly when eating, there was news that there was an announcement finding about the emergence of a large dungeon that had appeared in the Tokyo urban area. Then due to the sudden incident, the Adventurers Guild determined that the dungeon that appeared was a rank level. The Adventurers Guild has also issued a registration sheet for adventurers who wish to take part in the raid in the dungeon. And at the same time, an emergency quest appeared, where the quest says that the quest done by Siki is called Compensation Release of Restrictions and has a 6-star difficulty, and the system asks to complete dungeon crystal mines within 30 days. Discovering this, Siki didn't expect that there was a special quest like Nemia. But the most important thing is why this quest has a time frame. And when thinking about this, Siki finally realized that this quest was designated as compensation for releasing the forbidden restriction. And the system meant the dungeon that had just appeared in Tokyo City. And the reason why the quest has time is, if Siki can't complete it within the specified time, he will die. Hearing this, Sphere was very surprised. Even though he was a manager of power, she didn't know about this. The next day, Katoha begins to live a normal life. As for Siki, he will go to the realm evaluation site so he can enter the dungeon. Because the conditions to enter the A rank dungeon was at least he had to be a B rank, and for that today he would check it out. Of course, the officers there looked belittled Siki because someone without skill intends to evaluate to take part in raid in the A rank world. But at that time the officer was left speechless because after placing his hand on the evaluation site, the officer was surprised because he was embarrassed. Siki was an incompetent person, but his level is now 240. After passing the measurement exam, Siki is directed to the practical exam. And when heading to the exam site, Siki saw two men arguing, where the two men were an A rank person named Ryuzaki and his subordinate named Shimizu, where one can see that the crux of their problem is that Shimizu doesn't accept being blamed because it wasn't his fault. And of course, as the guild leader, Ryuzaki must be responsible for the fallen members. But the fact is that here Ryuzaki was angry and intended to hit Shimizu, but Siki, who saw this, stopped him. This makes Ryuzaki even angrier and intends to fight Siki, but that didn't happen because the summoner Ryuzaki went to the reception desk. Thanks to that, there was no chaos. Meanwhile, Shimizu was here thanking him and telling him about their problems and why Ryuzaki got angry like this. And the conversation between Siki and Shimizu was cut short after Siki was called to do a practice exam. Hearing this, Shimizu asked Siki to step down because Ryuzaki would be the examiner, where every year Ryuzaki becomes a tester and everyone who is always tested by him is always seriously injured. But here Siki said that it would be fine, even though I look weak, but actually I am a strong person. Meanwhile, on Ryuzaki's side, he saw his opponent was that the man earlier was very happy and was going to teach him manners. On the other hand, Siki isn't scared in the slightest. Instead, he's happy because his opponent is like him, because he doesn't need to hold back his strength to be able to beat him. Shortly thereafter, the test began, where Ryuzaki immediately landed an attack on Siki, but at that time Siki managed to avoid it. The unexpected effect of the attack shattered the floor, and it showed that Ryuzaki was a very strong adventurer. Adding to Ryuzaki's main strength is not all, where he can manipulate gravity as he pleases. But even so, his second attack was still able to be avoided by Siki. Seeing this, Ryuzaki is even more excited and will bring out his full abilities to get revenge. On the side of Siki, He then uses Tenma to increase defense if an attack from Ruzaki cannot be avoided. And because this could be dangerous for him, Siki uses the Eye of Wisdom to see his movements and thwart his gravity skill. Seeing that, Ruzaki was confused again, because, for the first time, he saw someone as strong as this incompetent. However, their fight did not continue because the test was over, while Siki also doesn't want to continue because he's still busy with other things. After the measurement and evaluation finally, it was decided that Siki would be rank A, while Shimizu, who saw that Siki was fine, felt confused. What was certain if he was fine meant that Siki was a very strong person. And because here Shimizu felt grateful, he gave his mobile number. If he needs help he will meet him. Then after finishing taking care of this, Siki needs steps to join the guild, and to be able to find out about this, maybe Siki will meet Takai or Suzukaze. And when heading home, surprisingly the wardens were running because a monster appeared in the middle of the city. Knowing that there was a monster, Siki rushed over to help. Since the appearance of the gate in the middle of the city was the cause, he would settle it with his own hands. And when you look at it with the eyes of wisdom, the monster is a giant snake. Knowing this information, Siki will take care of this quickly. The story begins with the exam supervisor named Hamada surprised after seeing the rapid development of Siki. Even though it's still a few months, Siki has become a rank A hunter even though someone is incompetent. Of course, Hamada, who found this, felt strange because even if someone was talented, at that time it was impossible to get rank A. Feeling that he didn't understand this, Hamada would tell the higher-ups of the Adventurers Guild about this. Scene continuation of several adventurers who are seen fighting the snake monster, and not just one but several B-rank adventurers. But their efforts were fruitless because the attacks they launched did not injure the snake in the least. Not long after, a B-rank adventurer named Seidu appeared, where the attacks from him are powerful enough to fight these monsters. From a distance, Siki just watched, because here he wanted to see how strong rank and C-rank adventurers were and what abilities they had. And when he saw their fight, Siki looked disappointed because even though they were at B rank level, why were they stupid? Even though the opponent they fought was still not defeated and is now absorbing energy to attack. Suddenly Seidu, who didn't expect this, was shocked and just kept silent, and at the same time, Siki, who couldn't stay still, appeared and slashed the monster with just one slash. The civilians who saw this were amazed at who it was, even though what they were fighting was a golem monster that had hard scales. On the side of Siki, who doesn't want to be attracted to attention, he leaves immediately, because if he gets caught, it will be troublesome in the future. But unfortunately, not far from there is a woman who has taken pictures and videos of Siki's actions when fighting the monster. It has not been revealed who this girl is. For sure she is an adventurer. Curious about the man, the girl searched the adventurer's database for information. And not long after searching, finally, the girl found that the man was Siki Iori and someone a rank. Seeing this, the girl became even more interested, especially when Siki was an incompetent person. We return to the direction of the Siki house, where at that time Kadoha was surprised that his brother's actions had been recorded and uploaded by a famous streamer named Nagisawa Suzu. This streamer is none other than the girl from earlier. Nagisawa Suzu used to be a famous idol, and then after the gate opened, Suzu became a famous adventurer and has great abilities. Seeing this is not happy, Siki feels disappointed because if his identity is spread, Kadoha is in danger. So here, because Siki doesn't want Kadoha to be in danger, he will contact Suzu and ask to delete the video. Not long after, finally, there was a reply that Suzu would delete the video as long as Siki wanted to meet at the agreed place, and as a result, like it or not, Siki here had to obey her. The scene continues the next day when Siki goes to the Adventurers Guild to meet up with Suzu. Then when he was there, Suzu immediately took him to a quiet room, because if he spoke in a public place it would invite a crowd. After arriving in the room, they introduced themselves each and then entered into the discussion of the meeting. To which Siki immediately told Suzu to delete the video. As agreed, Suzu immediately deleted it. But here Suzu advises that the response from the audience is quite good, but why doesn't Siki like that? Here Siki said that he didn't become famous because his life goal was not to be like that, which turned out to be a reason why Suzu wanted to meet Siki here. But because Siki doesn't want to stand out, he definitely won't accept it. Whereas if they work together, they can become famous quickly. Then Siki asks Suzu why she wants to be famous. Isn't she already famous now? Suzu replied that her popularity is not enough now because her dream is to become famous all over the world and visit several places to express her expressions. On the side of Siki himself, he started to think about creating a clan because to enter in a ranked dungeon he needed that. So here Siki thanks and will consider cooperating with her. Hearing that, Suzu looked overjoyed. But before that, Siki had a requirement if she cooperated with him, where here Siki asked Suzu not to record it without his permission. Found that Suzu accepted it. Now because they had agreed, they finally worked together to create a clan. And before going home, Siki asked Suzu for an autograph as a gift to Kadoha because Kadoha idolized her. Of course, before leaving, Suzu also asked Siki if he had any acquaintances he could join. Siki was blessed, but their levels were only C rank and F rank. Upon hearing that, Suzu was happy because if there was, then she could register clan with the Adventurers Guild. After returning from there, Siki immediately gave Kadoha an autograph from Suzu. The city that found this was grateful and overjoyed. Then Siki thought he would contact some people he wanted to work with, and the person he contacted was Takai. But Takai at that time couldn't come with him because he was still injured and still recovering. And because Takai couldn't join, Siki invited Amami and Suzukaze, and it also happened that they wanted to come, so there was one less person left. And when thinking about this, Siki remembers that Shimizu hasn't joined any clan yet, and for that he tries to contact him to ask if he wants to work with him to become a member of his clan. That night, feeling that he is still weak, Siki intends to grind to get stronger. Then Siki takes out a special key that can open a B-rank dungeon. Here Siki intends to become stronger so that he cannot escape the curse of the forbidden restriction. And soon the grinding began, and when entering Gate Siki he was immediately confronted by a large and very strong wolf monster. But with his current strength and level, a monster like that is nothing more than Siki. And to speed up the level up here, Siki summons Nemiya to finish off the monsters that are around. After 1 hour of hunting and killing all the monsters, finally Siki managed to meet the boss, and the boss that will be fought this time is the Monster Troll King. Before carrying out the attack, Siki asked Nemiya to fight the monster, but unfortunately, with just one attack, Nemiya was defeated. Seeing that this monster is very strong, Siki is getting excited because the stronger the opponent, the faster the level obtained. After getting ready, Siki immediately slashed from a distance with his sword pulped with Tenma energy. It looks like the powerful slash managed to defeat the monster with just one strike. After successfully defeating the monster, Siki got the title of Club of Kings, and his level has now risen to 400. After finishing hunting, Siki came home, and while resting, Suzu contacted him if he wanted to meet to discuss the clan created by Siki. Here Siki explains that he intends to create a clan to clear the dungeon. Hearing this, Shimizu accepted it. But before that, he told Ryuzaki to be careful because a few days had passed and Ryuzaki met him and asked for some information from him. Besides that, Shimizu also warned that Ryuzaki is a cruel person, so it's possible that when he does raid Didinji in a rank in the middle of us, Ryuzaki will use it for revenge. Hearing that, Siki said, "I don't know what Ryuzaki will do later, but he will be fine." After returning from that meeting, Siki had succeeded in gathering 3 people to be able to create a clan. So here Siki will immediately contact Suzu to set up a clan formation meeting and member introductions. And before that, Siki thought that the ranked dungeon could threaten its members. And since there were still 26 days left, Siki had no intention of entering the dungeon just yet. Because now he thought it was better to train Amami and Suzukaze to become stronger, so that during the raid there will be no unexpected things that could harm them both. And of course, because the time is very short, Siki will unusually train them. The scene continues as the meeting arrives, where Siki is going to take Kadoha because she wants to meet Suzu. Then when they were in that place, all had gathered. All members are noisy with a girl who is with Siki's genitals so they don't get confused. Siki introduces that she is his younger sister named Kadoha, while on the side of Kadoha, who saw his idol in front of his very eyes very happily. Well, now that everyone has gathered, Siki asked everyone to introduce themselves. And because everyone was already acquainted with Siki, revealed that this clan would radiate to the ranked dungeon that appeared in the middle of the city. But before doing the raid, Siki will train Amami and Suzukaze to make them even stronger, because they are both still at the level of F rank and C rank. At first, Amami and Suzukaze were confused about how Siki could make them both stronger in such a short amount of time. On the other hand, Suzu said that if the coach was Siki, maybe it wouldn't be impossible, because Siki has proven that even though he is an incompetent person and he can rise to a rank quickly. Now, so that everyone is not confused, Siki revealed that he has a skill, but his skill is not visible, because his skill is a hidden skill. The story continues with Siki discussing with the others. Siki said that he has a hidden skill. Of course, hearing that, everyone was quite surprised and no one expected it. It turned out that none of the members knew about it at all. Kadoha alone also doesn't know it. Siki apologizes for not telling them all this time. However, everyone becomes very aware of how Siki can be this strong. In Amami's mind, she said sure what happened in the dungeon past was Siki's hidden skill. Suzu asked, "What skill do you mean?" Siki can't tell in detail. In general, these skills allow them to master the abilities of various skills. Hearing that, everyone was very surprised how Siki could have such an illogical ability like that. Siki said that even though this skill is unreasonable, it also has weaknesses, but as long as you know it, that's enough for me. Suzuka asked, what does this skill have to do with making me and Amami stronger? Exactly. The connection is great, which is because incompetents don't have skills, they can use magic. Obviously, Amami, who didn't know anything, asked what is magic different from skill. Siki explained that basically skill is a form of magic, like magic that can be used properly by incompetent. And as Amami already knew, he had already cast magic even just once, where on that occasion Siki had only cast the spell strong enough to kill a minotaur in one shot. So that's why Amami is very suitable for studying magic. Meanwhile, Siki will give in-depth lessons regarding Suzuka's skills. According to the hypothesis, all high-rank adventurers have different levels of understanding of the skills they possess. Or in other words, there is a possibility that the skill can develop as she understands it. Suzu also confirmed that what Siki said had some truth to it. Skills can change depending on how you use them. So that's what Amami and Suzuki will learn in the near future. After returning from here, Siki wanted to teach Amami to consciously use magic. Of course, Kadoha and Suzuka are interested and come to see it, while the others have other businesses. When everyone entered Siki's room, Amami and Suzuka were very surprised by the fairies in front of them. Siki explains that he is named Sphere Iori, and Sphere is part of hidden skill. Then they headed straight to the point. Here Siki gave the same instructions as before, and I'll touch your back again to stimulate the MP flow. The ritual began, and Amami began to feel warmth emerging from within her body. Yup, that's exactly the MP stream. Siki says maybe you will be weak, but I will handle it. Siki asked Amami to control the flow of mana well. If it continues like that, then one day she will become a very great mage. However, when he had focused long enough, it seemed that Amami could no longer hold it in, and as a result, all of her stamina was drained. Seeing Amami's pretty good progress, Siki immediately gave her a potion to heal in a short time. Of course, Suzuka was surprised how could Siki get the potion. Same as before, Siki only replied that he got this potion from hidden skill. Soon Siki will repeat this exercise, because according to her now we can do it up to 50 times a day. Of course, Amami felt shocked because practicing 50 times a day would be very tiring. On the other hand, Siki said that this was just basic training. The sphere explained to Siki that Amami was an ordinary person, so you can only do it little by little. Long story short, the training ended, even though at a few points Amami had quite a hard time, but it's good that he has got an idea about doing magic. Then Siki and Suzu took Suzuka to a rank B dungeon. Now the one who will train Suzuka is Suzu, because according to her, she is the person who passes to develop Suzuka's skills. First, she asked Suzuka to explain her skill details. Suzuka explained that the skill was called Magical Cupid Bow and was able to add various effects to bows and arrows. She can also use elemental skills or debuffs on enemies. She could make the arrows go further or make them spin. Hearing this explanation, Suzu said, "Did Suzuka ever use any other method? Are you satisfied just because of that? And if she can come up with various ways to use skills, you will be able to deal with higher rank monsters with lower status." Because Suzuka didn't really understand the explanation, Siki asked Suzu to practice it directly against monsters. And that's right, ahead is the Minotaur. Suzu immediately took off at high speed, successfully dodging the Minotaur's arrow attack with ease. Then she used the Mirage Dancer skill. Actually, this is a support skill to buff team members, but by changing the way I can fight alone. She will cast a speed buff on her opponent's hind legs. That way the Minotaur couldn't balance with its front legs. Exactly, not long ago Minotaur that fell. Of course, it made Amami surprised. How to do this? Next, Suzu cast an attack buff on herself. It was clear that Suzu's attacks were terrifying. 1/Minotaur immediately dies. Then do you understand, Suzuka? Siki then explained again that skill is not related to the level you have, but strength skills increase according to the way you look at it. Inside her heart, Suzuka thought about whether she could do that. Meanwhile, Siki has another way to make Suzuka strong, namely with this item, Suzuka can become strong. Then Siki asked if you felt your skill had gotten stronger. Suzu answered yes, but I always thought it was because my level or stats increased. According to Siki, that is not the case. That is, you can increase your skills if your status rises. In other words, it is skill level. Hearing that, Suzu and Suzuka felt confused about what Siki was talking about. According to Siki, skill works exactly the same as status. Suzuka asked, if that's the case, why isn't the appraiser displaying the skill level? Siki answered, even though it's almost the same, the concept is different, so the skill level won't appear in appraisal. You need a different device to see the skill level. Because in this world no one has made it, Siki will make it so they can improve their skills. Then Siki immediately asked Suzuka to practice. By killing all the monsters in this dungeon, Suzuka will definitely be able to find out more about her skills. After returning from there, when making appraiser, Siki was very surprised because there was already one in the inventory. Siki was confused. How could an appraiser created in his previous life be here, but why is this also an appraiser status? Sphere explains that it could have been in Siki's previous life that both made him. However, Siki doesn't remember once doing that. Even though Siki is feeling confused, for now, he will put this matter aside as there is little time left. The only thing that matters now is to focus on mastering crystal mines. The next day, Siki immediately showed Suzuka appraiser status. Suzuka was obviously very surprised how Siki could possibly make it in just one day. Siki asked to put that problem aside and asked her to measure the skill right now. After laying her hands on the appraiser, Suzuka was very surprised because the skill level was obvious. Even though it was a B rank skill, it was still a low level. Knowing this, Suzuka became worried because it would be very difficult to enter a B or a rank dungeon. Siki said that it wasn't too much of a problem, the skill would get stronger if she mastered it. According to Siki, her skill potential is quite large. After knowing all that, Siki took her to the practice room. She would be training with Amami, so it was quite an efficient training. And it turns out that the training is very simple, where Amami and Suzuka will fight Siki alone. Of course, Suzuka and Amami were surprised because they couldn't possibly win against Siki, who was already this strong. Siki smilingly answered that this is the fastest way to make them both stronger. Before the fight started, Siki asked Suzuka to focus on improving her skills, while Amami only focused on using magic well. Since Siki had said that, the battle between them finally started. Suzuka prepares to move her bow filled with energy. Scene here can accelerate the rate of the arc. However, Siki can easily avoid it. But Siki is surprised by the bow that suddenly becomes a water wave. Taking the surprise attack, Siki wouldn't dodge it as a result of Suzuka's development. With the first attack successful, Suzuka releases her arrows, which are coated with lightning and will become shockwaves to take Siki down. However, the problem here is that Suzuka is still not very used to using it. As a result, the high-powered attack misses. But it didn't stop there. It turned out that Suzuka could control the arrow toward the target. Just as before, even though Siki was impressed by Suzuka's progress, the attack wasn't enough to injure him. Amami began to be able to feel the fire within her body. She immediately chanted the magic named Crimson Lotus Fireball with immense energy. Siki was surprised that Amami could do it in one chant. But Siki can easily destroy the magic with the same technique. After that, Siki praised them for their significant development. However, there are some problems that need to be fixed. Whereas in the slightly upset side because Siki can also use the same magic as him. Their next task is to work together to be able to limit my movements. An hour later, they finally finished their practice. But the result was they couldn't hurt Siki at all. Even though this training hasn't been fruitful, Siki believes that the two of them have progressed even though they don't realize it. Then their conversation was stopped by Shimizu, who gave bad news. Ryuzaki entered the crystal mines but has not returned for 2 days. Of course, Siki felt shocked by what actually happened to Ryuzaki. Well, that's all for today's discussion, because the story is still ongoing, so we'll stop it here. Thank you and sayonara.